Okay, I'm going to give a quick introduction to methods here. I'll probably chop it up into a few different lessons because there's quite a bit to say. First of all, I'll just say that methods are not really a new piece of functionality in Java. Most programming languages include, they either call them sub-procedures, subprograms. In Java, they decided to call them methods. Sometimes when they return a value, they're called functions. So all of these are basically the same thing. I think they call them methods because it's just, you're listing off a bunch of steps in order to accomplish a task, which could be called the method for doing a particular thing, right? So anyway, so we're going to look at methods, and it's not a new piece of functionality, like I was saying. It's really just a convenient way to organize your programs. It also helps with reusing code later. Once you've created a method and you've given it a name, you can call it later from other programs, even when it's useful. And we kind of know a little bit about methods already from using them in predetermined classes, predefined classes within Java. Like scanner class has some methods like next int, next line, next. Random class, we know that has also a next int method that produces a random number for you. So these are handy methods that somebody made so that we can reuse that code in our programs. Of course, there's also the math class, which has a whole bunch of methods that we've used in earlier programs that we've made. Okay, so we'll look at initially just the simplest type of method before we get into these other topics of parameters, return types, overloading, and passing by value and reference. So the approach is called sometimes top-down development, where you look at a problem, and to solve a problem with this top-down development approach, you kind of break it down into these smaller subtasks. Like this big task seems overwhelming, so let's say in order to solve the whole problem, we need to first of all be able to do this thing, that thing, and the other thing. And then we'll write methods for those things. And we'll put them together in the main method and call them when we need them. So if for some reason the solution to some task you're doing needs to know if a number is prime or not, then you could make a method to determine that. If you need maybe the ability to extract a digit out of a larger number, then you could make that a method on its own. Maybe finding the first character in a string, that could be another method, right? So on all of the things we've done up to this point, we could turn those into methods without any trouble at all. It's not really a difficult task. So in this case, your main method is just going to list off the main steps you're going to take in solving the problem, and call upon methods to do specific jobs for you. So the first level of subtasks is written in your main method, and then below that you'll have additional methods. So so methods are used to implement or solve a specific task or job for you. Methods have to be inside your class, so inside the public class, whatever you call your class, the curly brackets set there. Some people try and accidentally put them in their main method, but that's not correct. They have to kind of stack upon each other so that your main method would open with curly brackets and end with curly brackets. And then either below or above, it doesn't really matter. You can write your other methods. Sometimes I just like to see the main method first so I know the high level of tasks that we're going to do. And then when I want more details on how a particular subtask is being done, I'll look at the method and see how it's actually accomplishing that. So this is called procedural abstraction because you're kind of abstracting the big problem and not getting into the details, and you're just kind of very high level look at it, and then the things in the methods are more specific and detail oriented in how they're actually doing their job. But it's nice as a programmer not to have to know all the details of specific methods. Like, we really don't care about how math.square root does its job. We just care that we can use it. We know how to call that method from our programs. So that how it procedurally does the square root, that's abstracted from us. We don't need to know about it. Okay, so this is the general structure of a method, any method. First of all, it has an access level that can be public or private. That's a keyword. The method, class method, could optionally have the keyword static next. So we'll get into this later, but all of our methods are going to be static for now because we're calling them from our main method. And there's a rule that says if you call a method from a static context, then it also has to be static. So we're going to leave that in there for now, but you'll see later on when you make some methods, it doesn't need to be there. Um, and I'll try and sort of quickly say that a class method or one that's static is going to be one that is called from the class itself. So for example, math.pow, that's called from the math class with a capital M, and that's a static method belonging to the class math. You can contrast that with the scanner methods, because scanner, you make an object, maybe you call it input. So scanner input equals new scanner bracket bracket. Once you've got that object called input, then you're going to call the method from the object, like input.nextLine, that kind of thing. So um, those methods would be non-static. Anyways, that's not super important at the moment. The return type comes next, and void is a keyword meaning empty, right? So this means that this method here, it doesn't pass back a value to the statement that called upon the method to run. You could replace that keyword void with a number of, like any data type really, like it could be a primitive data type like int, double, boolean, char, or it could be a class like string or, you know, random or scanner. If that made sense to you, then it could return basically any type you want. Next is a method name. Method names need to start with a, well, I say need, but I need it to be properly named for my sanity and to, usually I award marks for proper naming conventions. So method names start with lowercase letter and subsequent words get uppercased. So you can see the capital T for two, capital C for Celsius, but F for Fahrenheit, lowercase. Now we look at the thing after this. Round brackets are here. That's so that you can optionally pass in parameters, which we'll talk about later, but methods, whether they use parameters or not, they have to have round brackets right after the name. And you're used to that from, using next int bracket bracket, right? It's an empty set of brackets, but that means that this thing is a method and not like a variable name. So the curly brackets open the body of your method, and the end is down there, and everything in between is the statements that you want to do when the method is run. We'll get into method parameters next, next lesson, but I did want to quickly just take a look at some code here. So this code here is the example in the book for temperature conversions. Basically what it does is, so I prefer to have my main method at the top, so maybe I'll move it right now. Just so I can see the high level of what's going on right away, but it doesn't matter for execution purposes. So basically what's happening here is it's gonna put a menu for choose one for this, two for that, depending on which conversion you want to do. And if it's a one, it's gonna call upon Fahrenheit to Celsius to convert my temperature, and otherwise it's gonna call on Celsius to Fahrenheit. So this is calling the method. And if I wanna know, or I care, how does this thing work, then I can go down and I can read the body of the method and see how it works. Similarly for this one, it's just the body is just going to be a little different to do a different conversion, but these are the simplest types of methods we can make. The textbook kind of starts off with these methods that are void because we don't have to worry about returning a value. When we call them, we just call them by their name. We don't have to say object dot or class name dot method because it's defined within our class, so we can just simply call it by its name, and we have to remember the round brackets. Again, this is a simple method because it doesn't take any parameters, and like I said, it doesn't return anything, it's void. So we start off there, and that's a good place to start. We don't really want to make it overly complicated at the beginning. So just to show you, I could decide that, hey, this is another subtask. If I want, I could just take this task of putting the menu up and make that another void method. So all you have to do to make a method is take the code you already have. I'm going to Control X to just cut that. And I already made a method header down here, public static void print menu. And inside there, I can just put my code, and that's just going to print some stuff to the screen. That's why it's void, because it doesn't give a value or calculate any value. And it doesn't take any parameters in the round brackets. It just simply runs. So when I want to run it from where I had that code used to be right here, I'm just going to call it by its name, print menu, I think I called it, bracket. It recognizes it because it finds it down here. And yeah, that's it. So now when I run my program, it's going to set up a few things like the scanner, and then it's going to run this print menu method, which means it actually jumps down to this section of the program, runs these three statements. When it's finished, it comes up to where it was, and control returns to the line following the method call, and it starts getting the integer for my choice. And if it's a 1, it does Fahrenheit to Celsius, at which time it would jump down here, get some values, calculate a result, print the result, and jump back up to here. It's done since it's an if else, and it would just stop. So that's the basics of how to make a method. And in the next lesson, we'll talk about how to pass in parameters so that they can be used within the body of your method.